everybody. Hello everybody. My name is Erin and this is Waiting Moose, and today I'm going to be doing a review of Savage Run by CJ Box. This book is the second in the Joe Pickett series by CJ Box, and it's a long series. I think it's at like 18 or 19 books right now, maybe even into the 20s. And this book is set in Wyoming. Joe Pickett is a game warden in Wyoming. So he's kind of living his dream life. Most game wardens are. This is the kind of, they don't get paid a fortune to do what they do, but he absolutely loves it. So he lives in Wyoming, I believe Cheyenne, with his wife and 2 daughters. Yeah, we get to experience that side of life through these novels. So let's just get started. This book is the second in the series. So we've met Joe before. I think you could probably start with this book without really falling too far behind on anything. It does not refer to the first book at all. And it's just really a good example of the outdoorsy mystery series. So what do we see in this book? It starts out really with a bang, literally. So much like the Kate Shugak series by Dana Stabenow, this one starts out with pretty high action. Immediately in the first paragraph, in fact, a young couple is killed by an exploding cow in a pasture. Now, what are they doing there? They're environmentalists. In fact, they are sort of that extreme, radical environmentalist type of personality, or at least the man is. So the man actually created one of the environmental groups in the States. It's a fictional environmental group, but he is the founder of it. And that is, he and his new wife are out in the forest, in the mountains of Wyoming, hammering nails into trees to prevent forestry. As they're leaving the forest for the day, he sees cattle. And this environmental group is also against cattle ranching, believing it's, bad for the environment, and, be that as it may, whatever your thoughts are on that. He goes out into the field ranting about the cattle that are there, and then this cow blows up. Cow explodes and kills the couple. So that's how our opening scene is. It starts out, as I said, action-packed, and it kind of stays that way. So Joe is on scene when it happens because the police officer who gets the call is told that there was an explosion in the forest and there were dead animals. They weren't sure if they were livestock or if they were wild game. So obviously the game warden is called out as part of his job. And so he gets curious about this right away. And there's some foreshadowing that happens, and I think it's done really well, right? Because sometimes you get the foreshadowing and you're like, oh, yeah, great, you just told me what's going to happen. But in this case, Joe can feel that somebody's watching him, but it's not clear who it is that's watching him. Is it the perpetrator? Is it the cow blew up? Is it yeah, so there's a number of groups of people that could have been involved in blowing up this cow. Joe is sent to notify the owner of the cattle, and this guy is just a dick. He is not a nice person at all. You will not like him. He's got 0 redeeming qualities anytime that Joe talks to him. 0. And you see a lot of Joe's flawed sides through these interactions, actually, because he goes up against this rancher and he's like, yeah, you know what, you've got all the power here. Even though he's the game warden, this rancher is very powerful. He is a businessman. He knows the governor. He can pretty much get Joe fired. So Joe is at a disadvantage, and instead of keeping his mouth shut and walking out of the guy's home, he accuses him of poaching an elk. Which, maybe not the best move there, Joe. But, so yeah, this sets up the conflict between Joe and a rancher. There's just so much conflict going on. And in the meantime, the dead man, the man who was supposedly blown up by the cow, is actually calling Joe's wife. Because they dated at one point in college, way before Mary Beth knew Joe. So anyway, this is how the whole story starts. And then Joe ends up on the mountain after, about halfway through the book. And this is one of the perpetrators is talking at this point to some environmentalists. Sorry, I had to get back to. I'm doing this for me, not you, Coble snapped. Our job seemed right at first. It seemed the only way left to strike back. You people threatened our way of thinking and our way of life. All you environmentalists just showed up one day and told us that everything we've done for years was now wrong, and everyone living in the West was a stupid, ignorant criminal. You people expect everyone out here to suddenly give up the only jobs they've ever known in mines and in the fields. He shot a dirty look at Brittany. And the forests. Somehow, all of us are expected to get jobs working out of our homes with computers, telephones, and modems. That's all you offered up as an alternative, you know. Like lumberjacks and cowboys can just change over to being software programmers. Coble's voice began to rise, and his face began to flush. None of you know or appreciate how tough and raggedy ass it used to be in this country. Hell, 140 years ago, this was still a wilderness out here. Indians ran the show. Even 30-odd years ago, when I started working for the state of Montana as a brand inspector, it was rough and it was real out here. There was bad weather and bad land and no water. If you looked over your shoulder, the country was gaining on you and ready to wipe you out at any minute. The last thing anybody ever thought of was that they were ruining the earth. Hell, we all thought the earth was ruining us. So this page actually kind of highlighted to me, as somebody that came from a farm, this page highlighted to me that critical disconnect between city life and rural areas. In the cities, it's, you know, on both sides. It's easy to look at it and go, you're wrong. And in a lot of cases, they're not. You know, there's a lot of gray area. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but I just felt like that, when I read that page, it absolutely crystallized for me the dispute, the distance we have between urban and rural in our country. And I'm in Canada, right? And right now, this is a big debate going on. There's all sides of this that you can see, and that's why this book I think hit home for me quite a bit, was that it tackles the agricultural industry, it tackles the environmental people. It even, I think it got into, did it get into mineral rights? I don't think it did. Anyway, so it really goes into that, and you know, say what you will about what the man said. He's a villain in the book. This guy was not a good man in the book, but it gives you the motivation for what he was doing, and I don't think that any of us understand the other side in a lot of these discussions. But that's not what the book, the review is about. Obviously, the book is very much about that. He goes into this divide without, I think, alienating either side. And to me, I live in the middle of that, right? Like, my family still farms. I'm a computer programmer. There's the two sides of the world coming together in me. I love going to the farm, by the way. The farm, it's a completely different way of life, and it's like nothing. Joe ends up on the mountain with some of the environmentalists trying to protect them from basically an assassin. And the whole Savage Run part of the book is about this canyon in the middle of the mountains of Wyoming. And there's a legend about this canyon where a group of Indians went to bed at night, and another group of Indians from a different tribe. So I think it was it Lakota and Cheyenne? I want to say it was Lakota and Cheyenne. So the Cheyenne went to bed at night. It was old men or like elderly people and women and children in this camp because the young men had gone out hunting or in a war party. And this other group of indigenous people had actually planned to ambush the camp of elderly people and women and children and kill them in the night and take their horses. When they went to, it's a story told in the book, but when they went to do this, the camp was empty, the horses were dead. And it turns out that somehow this group of elderly people and children and women had crossed this canyon that was uncrossable, right? Like you couldn't get across it from one side to the other. And when the Lakota, I think it was the Lakota, ended up on the edge of the canyon, they looked across and there were these other people and there was nothing they could do. They couldn't get them, right? So anyway, this canyon factors into the story, and it's a fascinating story. And it's funny because this series is set in Wyoming, and it talks about the Powder River country, which crosses into Walt Longmire's territory. Again, he's always in the Powder River territory. And so for me, this was really, it was great. It was great that way. As a book, it kind of examined that divide between rural and urban, between environmentalist and rancher, between rancher and rancher, because it also delves into the fact that ranching has become trendy for wealthy people to do. So basically they're gentlemen ranchers. They buy a ranch so that when they're at their parties in LA or New York, they can go, yes, I was just out at my ranch in Wyoming, or out at my ranch in Montana, and be the wealthy, man talking about his ranch, where someone else is really looking after it and doing all the work, but they own the ranch and they're gentlemen ranchers. And so they've made a change, a huge change in the way of life in these areas. So as a book, you go beyond the story, which was fascinating to begin with. I mean, I love an adventure story like this in the mountains, with good versus bad. But, and the scenery and everything else, where you get immersed in that lifestyle and in that environment. But it also tackled this, what is happening in the West and how these people are being affected overall. So I loved the story. I thought it was really well done. I would actually give it a 4 out of 5 stars, because I don't know if I can say this. This isn't really a flaw, but I've read a lot of Walt Longmire, right? Like, I'm almost caught up on the Walt Longmire series. And Walt is plotting, but he's smart. You know that he's going to get his man. You know that, he's figuring out, he or Henry Standing Bear will be figuring it out long before you do. And everything just kind of goes and goes and goes. In this case, Joe's kind of a bumbling game warden. He's not what I would consider, he will go, he's very determined, much like Walt is, but he's not the most intelligent man when it comes to this stuff. I actually kind of took a star off because of the animal deaths. Now, I don't want to give too much away on this, but just as, Joe is starting to come to terms with horses being as useful for his job as ATVs or vehicles, his horse gets shot. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. I also kind of struggled a little bit with the stumbling upon of solutions for Joe and the people he's trying to protect as they go through the mountains. Yeah, that's really the only criticisms I had of it. I really enjoyed the book, though. I highly recommend it. If you enjoy this type of outdoorsy adventure story, absolutely pick it up and read it. So yeah, that is Savage Run by CJ Box. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.